They say some commenters have also suggested that the commission should consider the costs of clean heat plans when setting clean heat targets, even though the statutory provisions directing the commission to set targets do not mention costs. So silly us for thinking that the regulators in charge of setting just and reasonable rates should consider costs. Don't you know that the progressive lawmakers didn't care about costs when they passed the law in the first place? That's the argument being advanced here. This is what we're up against. This is what the utilities are up against. And ultimately, this is what ratepayers are looking down the barrel of when it comes to these clean heat plan proceedings. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And this week we want to touch on a topic we've brought up a few times in the past, but it's particularly relevant today because actually as of us recording this episode, the Colorado Public Utilities Commission is actively holding a pretty much all day long public comment hearing for the so-called proposed rulemaking related to updating the clean heat plan targets that we've talked about so much in the past. It's these rules that stem from state legislation requiring gas utilities like XL and Black Hills and Atmos to over time slash their greenhouse gas emissions from their gas service. And the Polis Administration has sort of parachuted in to try to greatly ratchet up those reduction requirements. And we filed public comments on this. And now the PUC, as we speak, is hearing from the general public on this matter. And so we thought it might be worth, touching on this a little bit. And I know you monitored some of the comments, and we've actually seen some more written response comments to our comments of all things. And so it's a big comment palooza on a very important topic and one that could potentially be disastrous for ratepayers.
Yeah, and Jake, I want to say this. I actually have some sympathy for the public utilities commissioners today because these are brutal comments. At least the ones I heard this morning, I've signed off. I'm going to sign back on right after we finish here so that I can hear the deliberations. But just to refresh listeners or viewers' memory on this. We actually filed comments on this proceeding where this was the CEO, the Colorado Energy Office, and they asked, and I think it was the air quality control that they actually wanted to increase the emissions reductions target. And we filed comments on these increased targets, but also just on the whole clean heat plan in general. And we submitted those comments. And let me just share with you, first of all, what they wanted to do. So if you remember back from our show several weeks ago, we were telling you that every single utility that has to comply with this, which is all the utilities in the state, they can't meet the target. They can't meet 22% reduction under the 2.5% rate cap. And Excel has even said it could cost $20,000 a ratepayer. And by the way, they have to meet this 22% by 2030. So in 5 years, they have to meet this 22% emissions reduction. And this is all part of this beneficial electrification. It's to force you off of natural gas and have everything in your house electrified, because then they're going to power that with wind and solar. And once that happens, Colorado's climate, apparently that there will be no warming, we'll be in this climate utopia. The ski resorts will get enough snow. Those people who commented today will no longer have asthma. I mean, everything will be absolutely perfect if we spend, hundreds of billions of dollars doing this. So no, under the original legislation, it was 22% by 2030. No utility can meet that with the 2% cost cap, a 2.5% cost cap. So the enter the CEO and quality control division. What do they say? They want it instead of 22% by 2030, they want 41% by 2035. So rather than make it easier or give some flexibility to utilities to meet this rate cap and not bankrupt ratepayers, they went the opposite direction and are doubling down on this. And 22% by 2030, they can't meet it. Black Hills says full compliance would be 67 times over that 2.5% rate cap. Just think, 67 times. And where are their natural gas customers, Pueblo? Not exactly the way. I'll tell you where they're not. They're not in Boulder County. They're not in Summit County. They're not in Pitkin County, which, by the way, those were the people who you heard on comment early on in today's comment palooza, as you so appropriately put it. And then Xcel Energy projected over $1 billion in compliance costs, plus more in customer conversion expenses. I mean, and our modeling shows that the 100% renewable grid plus the clean heat plan, you're looking at like $620 billion. I mean, it's nuts. It's just nuts. And so we submitted comments and said, don't increase the or blow out the cost caps, because that was the other option. We could also just get rid of the cost caps. Well, that's what that was one of the things. Should we get rid of the cost caps? And then should we accept these higher targets, these more stringent targets? And we came back and said, no, you shouldn't. We already can't meet it. We already can't comply with it. Making it more stringent, making these regulations like talk about putting the boot on the neck of ratepayers. This is what that would do. And so part of our argument was just cost, but also it really is regulatory overreach. I mean, it's just, no one has done, other than the Independence Institute and now these utilities, that no one who is advocating for these policies has ever done a cost analysis. I mean, they just don't, it doesn't even enter into their minds that they should do that. The other thing I said, so besides regulatory overreach, there's a potential regulatory takings, I think. I mean, because you're forcing customers to strand their assets and you're not compensating them. And in fact, you're making them pay for it. I also included the problems with Colorado's clean heat plan in our comments that we submitted to the Department of Justice's request for information on state regulatory overreach. And this is a prime example of it. So that's where we are. And what's funny is you mentioned it, the number of people that actually responded to our comments. I'm just thinking, we'll submit them and there they are. And no, people, I said this off air before we got started. It's either the apocalypse is upon us, or maybe, just maybe, we're right when Xcel Energy and the Independence Institute are on the same page that this would be a disaster for customers.
Yeah, I figured you'd get a kick out of that one because, as you mentioned, Excel's public, they call them response comments, where the parties respond to the early comments that were filed, including the Independence Institute. And sure enough, there we are cited in Excel's comments, alongside, honestly, quite a strange coalition of groups, labor unions, Pueblo County, some of the other utilities, in terms of, look at all these other groups that are quite concerned, as we are, with the costs and feasibility of meeting these targets. Atmos Energy, the other gas-only utility involved in this proceeding, they similarly cited us. And
Hills.
and then another group or another coalition that cited us actually were folks sort of on the other side of this issue, the Sierra Club and SWEEP, the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, who are like the leading electrification advocates in Colorado, as well as Western Resource Advocates. They also cited the Independence Institute several times in their comments, trying to critique our comments. But I want to highlight one portion where they cite us because it's just so on the nose in terms of the dynamics at play here. Under a subsection called cost considerations, this is the environmental groups here. They say some commenters have also suggested that the commission should consider the costs of clean heat plans when setting clean heat targets. Even though the statutory provisions directing the commission to set targets do not mention costs. So silly us for thinking that the regulators in charge of setting just and reasonable rates should consider costs. Don't you know that the progressive lawmakers didn't care about costs when they passed the law in the first place? That's the argument being advanced here. This is what we're up against. This is what the utilities are up against. And ultimately, this is what ratepayers are looking down the barrel of when it comes to these clean heat plan proceedings.
Yeah, no, they don't care about costs. And so the far environmental left, those that put emissions first, in other words, emissions over human thriving, emissions over everything, they don't care about cost.
Right.
It's pretty, actually, it was eye-opening because they were blatant about it this morning. No, cost is not the issue. Emissions are the issue. And in fact, this was the other thing. So Tracy Burnett, who those of you might remember, she was I wasn't here at the time, Jake, but correct me, she was convicted of a felony.
I don't remember the conviction, but she was for sure charged with a felony.
Charged with a felony? Yeah, because what was it? She lied about where she lived.
Right. Yeah. Wasn't actually living in the district that she supposedly was representing in the state assembly.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you can't do that. You actually have to live in the district.
It's a big no-no in Colorado.
Yeah, you have to do it. So, but she was there. They were very deferential to her, where she talked about the clear intent of the legislature, which was rapid decarbonization. And she said they were very clear that a social cost of carbon must be included in these. And there was no mention of the cost to ratepayers. So how much the public would actually have to bear on the cost of this. And this was interesting too. Some of those comments were meant to challenge the PUC and saying, we need leadership on this. We need real leadership, and we need bold and aspirational goals. We need these, in other words, we need it to be 41% by 2035, and then you got to move to 2040, and you got to be at zero by 2050. These were, and all of these people, they were from, like I said, Summit County. Summit County, Pitkin County, Boulder County. I think there was somebody from Denver. But none of them were concerned about cost at all. In fact, it's parroted that very same thing. You shouldn't even consider costs. Emissions, consider emissions. Emissions are the thing. But no need to talk about cost. Forget the fact that these people are going to have to burn, animal dung or the legs of their furniture to keep warm because they can't afford their utility bill. And then I will say the other one, the woman that I heard right before I had to sign off, she was from Wheat Ridge, and she also didn't care about cost, said she has asthma. She grows vegetables on her 1 acre lot. Her asthma's getting worse. And so therefore everybody must, it's kind of a COVID thing. We're all in this together. And if my asthma is bad, you must convert all of your natural gas to electricity because my asthma is bad. I mean, it's very much of that vibe where I'm or Earth is, the climate is changing and it's apocalyptic in nature. It is alarmism. These people are truly, truly worried about it. You heard, we don't have time. We don't have time. So you must do this now. And we have to drag the state with us. And the other thing we have to do our fair share. That's the other thing. And I want to go, yeah, Wyoming doesn't care.
Right.
Kansas doesn't care. Nebraska doesn't care. Utah doesn't care. In fact, they're probably all just laughing. So the idea that we would bankrupt ourselves, impoverish ourselves in order to satisfy this irrational reaction is in knowing that you're going to have absolutely no impact, zero impact on climate when you say, it's a global issue, yet we are going to do it locally. We're going to bankrupt ourselves locally. And the funny, I guess they think they're leaders, like they're role modeling, but nobody's following except for, states like California and Hawaii and, a couple of others, handful of others.
It's the exact myopia that we talk about so often on this show in terms of a policy view, but rarely do you hear it sort of articulated so explicitly, both in those comments and in the comments of folks that responded to us saying, hey, why are you even talking about costs? Hush, 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 hush. This is about emissions. Yeah. Don't even talk about costs. You rarely see it so explicitly laid out. And the point you make about Colorado, asking Colorado to ratepayers and consumers to shoulder the burden, frankly, for a global issue is a good one. And it relates to another topic we wanted to touch on before we wrapped up here. And this is something else we've covered in the past. And this is the ongoing effort by folks in Boulder County and the city of Boulder as well to sue Suncor and Exxon over basically their existence, the fact that they produce fuels that consumers everywhere rely on, and trying to hold them accountable basically in a tort suit for the alleged harms that they've experienced locally as a result of climate change, they say. We covered this back, this Colorado Supreme Court allowed that case to proceed past the motion to dismiss stage. In the interim, those fossil fuel companies aren't, taking that lying down. And so they've gone to the U.S. Supreme Court and asked the justices to weigh in. And so as the justices are considering whether or not to do that, Independence Institute has actually very recently, and we're happy to announce, was able to join an amicus brief with like-minded partner organizations, folks at the Manhattan Institute in New York, the Frontier Institute in Montana, and the Pelican Institute out of Louisiana, where we basically, the brief basically makes the case that Amy, you and I have made the case about on this very topic in the past. And we had Gail Norton, former Colorado Attorney General and Secretary of the Interior. She made a similar case, and it's that you cannot use local tort lawsuits against global or national, or in this case, Exxon international companies, and trying to hold them accountable for climate change for economic activity that they're doing in Wyoming, Texas, California, not even the state of Colorado, a city and a county in Colorado cannot use lawsuits to try to hold them accountable for that, for something, and by the way, something that we all still benefit from as well.
Think about that too. It's the city and county of Boulder. What is amazing to me is that Boulder runs this state. The crazy people in Boulder are in charge of this state. Is it any wonder we're in why we have budget shortfalls? I mean, they don't seem to have any concept of money. They have no concept of the hubris. of the city and county of Boulder to tell Suncor and Exxon that, we need $1 billion from you to fight climate change. Actually, what they needed is to balance their budget probably, or to pay off all the attorneys that hired for this, for an issue that is international in scope. And like there was the judge in Maryland who dismissed a case. I think it was Maryland, where they said, you are trying to get in the back door what you couldn't get through the front door. In other words, it is a way to get the legislation you want, but you can't get legislatively. So you're trying to get it judicially. And actually, another thing that I put in our comments to the DOJ in their request for information of regulatory, sort of overreach in the state, I put this lawsuit in there. There is the Supreme Court had an opportunity back in February when they first heard those arguments to do the right thing. And I think that, when did the decision come out? Maybe May. They had the opportunity to do the right thing and just say, we're going to dismiss it. They didn't. Of course they didn't, because Colorado's crazy. Like, these people actually think that the city and county of Boulder have a case against Exxon and Suncor for international activities for products that we all use. Why doesn't Boulder take the lead and just stop with all carbon? Just stop it. Show us how it's done. But they can't. It's like I said, it's so remnant. It's so COVID. Now you get the COVID response, which is, no, you have to get the vaccine. You must get it. There is no such thing as herd mentality. And it's like, well, wait a second. If you have the vaccine, you won't get it. Remember, they said that, no, but you must get it. So it's this need. It's this need to punish. It's this need to make sure everybody does what you want them to do. It's just the hubris of all of it is astounding. There's a great brief, by the way, and something called horizontal federalism, I think is what the term that was used in this. And Elias Shapiro was one of the attorneys on it. He's brilliant. And the other one was Marcella Burke, and another, just great. There are great legal minds. It's a law firm down in Texas. So I just, listen, if those are the people, that brief, those are the folks you want on it to make your case to SCOTUS for it to be dismissed.
Yeah.
If they can't do it, then I think we're all in trouble. But it was so well laid out.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We'll drop it in the show notes for folks that are legal nerds or are interested in this issue, so they can check it out as well. And we hope that, the justices have had opportunities in the past to sort of nip this kind of thing in the bud from other states' lawsuits that are trying a similar tactic. Let's hope that this time around they decide once and for all that, no, you don't get to do this, progressive locality. You don't get to kill global oil and gas firms just because you don't like what they do. And to your point, couldn't get done legislatively. You don't get to enact that policy through tort lawsuits. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners on the clean heat plan stuff or the Boulder lawsuits?
Yeah. So just a couple of things. One is, you said it earlier. I've never seen it quite so blatantly. They are just open and honest about, they don't care about cost. I've said that before, where I've said I've never seen a state where economic arguments just fail to land. And there is no concern about cost, none. And the other thing I would say is so no concern about cost. They have this myopic view of just the world. It's all self-centered. They have no context or no perspective from history. And this was based on commenters, but I also think it goes to that Boulder climate lawsuit, because it's all about them. It's this self-centered, me. So the Marshall Fire, as horrible as it was, which it was awful. And for those of you who went through it, survived it, my heart goes out to you. But I will say there have been big fires in history. A couple that I would look at, look up the fire of Peshtigo, which is in Wisconsin. Look at that fire. Look at the Chicago fire. There was also another fire, I think it was in Minnesota. There was actually a book on it. I can't remember the name, but there have been large fires before where human life has been lost. And most of the time it's because it's been dry. Yes, dry conditions happened prior to the internal combustion engine. I know that shocked some people, but they did. So it's really this lack of there's this lack of historical perspective because everything must have just happened during the time that I was alive. I mean, it's really weird. And then you know what? You're not going to be able to afford to heat your home, so make sure you firm your own grid because rates are going to go up if the PUC decides the way many of the commenters this morning would like them to.
Yeah, firm your own grid, folks. But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If you like what you saw, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And of course, if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview here on the show, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.